We haven't seen something like this since Joe Montana and Steve Young were both on the 49ers. Brock Purdy and Mac Jones are both in the top 4 of success rate when we look at NFL quarterbacks this season. Brock Purdy is even number 1. The 49ers have the best quarterback room in the league, and we've got one of the best views in the Bay Area right now here from Sausalito as we kick off what I think is the most compelling stretch of the Kyle Shanahan era in regular season play.
Our friend of the San Francisco Standard. You can read him. You should read him. You can give him a follow at Lombardi himself. He is David Lombardi, and he joins us on the UMA guest line. David, thanks so much for your time. How's it going?
Oh, well, we're out in Sausalito right now. It's sunny. I didn't expect it to be, but just, a couple days off, and then we're going to be back at it. It's cold here, but it's going to be a lot colder in Indy. Thankfully, the game's inside.
Yeah, they do play in the dome there. So are you in the Bay and in a wetsuit? Are you going right to Poggio's for a carb load with a nice
I don't wear wetsuits anymore.
rigatoni?
I don't wear.
I know you don't. I know. You're crazy. Are you
Graduated
swimming
to the
today?
level-
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I will be swimming, but not in Sausalito. But I ditched the wetsuit about a year ago, so I'm fully cold acclimated. I've got my layer of yellow fat, which is what polar bears have, so I could swim in the winter.
Hit Poggio's after for a carb load, after whatever you're doing. So good to hear your voice, my friend. Let's get right to it. And
You
Brock, honestly, has he played as well as he played yesterday in any game last year? In my mind, I think you have to go back to when they got off to that 5-0 start, and it was always 30 for Purdy, and it's a lot of games 35. He was just so on top of everything, and I know you love third down conversions as much as I do. To convert the first 7, and a couple of them were runs, but some of his biggest plays yesterday were on third down. Just how do you assess the Brock Purdy performance yesterday, David?
I just thought that his risk-reward calculator is so finely tuned yesterday, and that's something I was critical of in the game against Carolina. Those were the 3 interceptions in the first half. It seemed that he was still getting that back. I know that he and Kyle both said that he was making the right decision with the football, maybe by the letter of the play. But some of the risk reward was a little out of whack against Carolina. Yesterday, it was 100% on point with every single decision. And you know what? Physically, he looks 100% healthy. I really have to add that in. I mean, he's moving really well. There was all that worry about him not being able to drive the football. I don't think that was ever really a thing since he returned in this stretch. That might have been a thing against Jacksonville in week 4. But he's making all the throws. He looks really comfortable. And most importantly, that risk-reward calculator is really, really working for him right now.
David, as far as Brock Purdy coming back, I mean, he had the bad half in Carolina, and then we transitioned to Cleveland and Tennessee, where it looked so much more in tune, as you just noted. What would you say the biggest difference is with all of that? Is it judicious throwaways? Is there something a little bit different to timing? Maybe did he need to shake off the rust, even though that itself wasn't present in his first game back in Arizona? What would you attribute it all to?
Well, I think that, you look at Purdy and you talk about Ricky Pearsall too. Well, I go back to training camp, and I remember how well those two synced in training camp. And I think that really carried over to the very start of the season. And then obviously they both got hurt. And that happened at the same time against Jacksonville in week 4. When you're talking about a Kyle Shanahan, talking about rhythm, you're talking about timing, and really any NFL offense is really based on rhythm and timing. And I think that as time has gone on since Brock Purdy's return, the rhythm and the timing has come back, and with that comes confidence, and that's why he delivered one of the best outings that we've seen from him yesterday.
And Brock and Ricky came back together for that game at Arizona in mid-November, and they lit him up for 41 points. And I know Ricky hadn't been statting out until yesterday, but I just want to get your thoughts on the difference in the football team with Mac Jones at quarterback versus Brock. And Mac went 5-3, and the Niners were the number 1 passing offense in football. And Brock did start the opener in Seattle, did come back and re-aggravate the toe injury against Jacksonville. So these stats do include a couple of Brock Purdy starts, David. But, overall, they were number one in the NFL in passing the football, over 261 yards a game, but they were merely 23rd in the 32-team NFL in scoring at 22 points per game. Since Brock has come back, and Ricky along there, a breakout game yesterday, but a lot of it is Brock. 41 against Arizona, 20 with the 3 picks on Monday night against Carolina, but they held them to 9. Through the wind and that great Schwartz defense and Myles Garrett, they were able to score 26 points and a really good Cleveland defense and a tough day to play. And then yesterday they go for 37. So in the 4 games Brock's been back, they're back to 30 for Purdy. They're averaging 31 points per game when it was just 22 a game. 5-3 for Mac and 1-1 with Brock, early in the year. So how do you assess the difference in the 49er offense when Mac Jones is the quarterback versus when Brock Purdy is the quarterback, David?
Well, it's why they paid Brock Purdy $53 million and why Mac Jones is a backup. And, they're both doing a fantastic job. This is a crazy stat. When you look at success rate, which is the percentage of plays that generate a positive EPA, Brock Purdy and Mac Jones are both in the top 4 of all NFL quarterbacks this year. So they've both done a really consistent job avoiding the negative plays, generally giving positive plays. Purdy's number 1 and Mac Jones is number 4. So the floor has been fantastic for both of the quarterbacks. That's why Mac presided over a 5-3 was starting this year. But the ceiling just raises when Brock is in there. And, the 49ers this year, the explosive play rate has not been nearly as high as years before. I think it's because they have had some struggles at the wide receiver position. They obviously have missed Brandon Aiyuk. They've missed Ricky Pearsall. Jauan Jennings has been hurt. But what Purdy gives you is a true chance to up that explosive play rate, even if things aren't perfect on the outside because of his escapability. And, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing extended plays. There was a lot of that yesterday. I think that Kyle Shanahan had a great quote after the game yesterday where he said, somebody asked him about the danger of throwing into tight windows. And Kyle said, what are you talking about? I want my quarterbacks to throw into tight windows, because if you don't throw into tight windows, you're not going to score a lot of points in this league. So Purdy's got a little bit of a gunslinger in him. And that's why I talk about the risk reward calculator. When that is working for Brock, then he combines the necessary risks to get the maximal reward without putting the ball into harm's way. And yesterday I think he found that balance perfectly, and he's generally found that balance perfectly outside of that first half against Carolina.
David Lombardi of the SF Standard joining us here on this Monday. Getting ahead of ourselves maybe a little bit as far as looking beyond the season. The news was broken over the weekend that Brandon Aiyuk is not going to be returning and likely has played his last snap here with the team. And you detailed in the Standard the difference between a release and a trade scenario and why a release is much more likely. Can you just break down a little bit for us how the release varies from a potential trade in terms of finances and what we can ultimately expect the 49ers have in front of them this offseason?
Well, financially, it would actually be very similar because dead money is money that you've already paid a player but hasn't yet hit the salary cap. So the dead money is going to be similarly constructed and hit the cap in the same way, regardless of if it's a release or a trade. It's just going to all accelerate and hit the cap at once. Now, they could release him post-June 1st or trade him post-June 1st, and then you stave off some of the dead money to later seasons. It's about the feasibility of a trade. And a lot of that is going to be reliant on if they get some cooperation from Brandon Aiyuk. And based on what Kyle Shanahan said yesterday, they haven't seen him in a month. So it seems to me that getting any bit of cooperation from Brandon Aiyuk is going to be an uphill battle because he's still has the $25 million option bonus on his contract that's set to hit on September 1st. It's just no longer guaranteed since they voided the guarantees. But any team that would acquire Brandon Aiyuk's contract would inherit an option bonus, the $25 million option bonus that they'd have to pay on September 1st. So that means that For a guy that hadn't been in the 49ers facility for a month, who hasn't played since week 7 of 2024, I would think that any prospective trade suitor would want to amend his contract before trading for him, and that would require a level of cooperation from Brandon Aiyuk. So I just don't think that's all too likely at this point. I think that an outright release might have to be the way that the 49ers go.
The whole thing is just beyond sad, and it's just unbelievable that Brandon would vanish like this for the last month or so. He's already lost dozens of millions of dollars in guaranteed money. That's why I spoke out, a couple of weeks ago, Greg, is you want to play football and you got to make them want you to play. I had gotten rumblings that he was not in the building. I don't know what his desire is here, if he wants to play in the NFL or what's his end game. But he needed to show the NFL that he was healthy. Maybe he's not. Maybe that's part of the problem. So you just got to move on, and we'll address this more in detail, obviously, in the off season, as we will Jauan Jennings contract. And the one thing, even when that 1 year when it was a contentious negotiation with Aiyuk, David, my thing was you can't trade your ex wide receiver on a team that just went to overtime in the Super Bowl and scored first. There's nobody else on this roster can play X. Well, Jauan Jennings has made the transformation to playing X wide receiver. He had a big year last year, should have had 1,000 yards. And then this year, in some categories like touchdowns, he's even bettered that. But he wanted more money in the offseason. They were able to incentivize some of his money. Explain to our audience and myself and Greg as well, did he hit those incentives this year? He's missed a lot of time, but they are tied to snaps, and, the touchdown rate is there. So what will Jennings get this year as far as added money when he, redid his deal slightly? And then I think they'd like to re-sign him. It's hard to franchise tag him. You're not going to do that because he's not going to make that kind of money. So what did they do to incentivize the contract? Will he hit that? And ultimately, what do you think it'll take to re-sign him to a long-term deal if they desire in the offseason?
I've got to look up the exact incentives to give you a firm answer on that. I know that it was a certain touchdown threshold for this season. So what's going to happen is that, and it was based primarily on last year's numbers. And last year's numbers were very good for Jauan Jennings because he had to pick up the slack early on. Remember that Rams game? I think that was week
Yes,
three
the 3 touchdown
2
game
last season.
Yeah,
the massive 3 touchdown game. So it was always going to be a little bit of an uphill battle actually for Jauan Jennings to get to the numbers from last year, just because he got off to such a torrid pace at the beginning. And remember, the only reason he didn't get the 1,000 receiving yards last year was because of the ejection that shouldn't have been at Arizona. So I believe that one of the incentives is tied to 900-something receiving yards, which he had last year. Will he surpass that or not? The other one is touchdowns. So we'll take inventory at the end of the year, because a lot could happen here over the final 3 games, especially given what we saw yesterday, where I thought that this was the first time all year that the 49ers had seen Ricky Pearsall and Jauan Jennings truly combine forces to pick up the slack that they needed to pick up in the absence of Brandon Aiyuk at the receiver position. I mean, the 49ers had been surviving offensively by going heavy volume Christian McCaffrey, heavy volume George Kittle whenever George had been available. He obviously has had his injury issues this year. But like I said, they still rank low in explosive play rate this season. They still rank low in some separation metrics, in large part because they hadn't been getting that consistent space-making presence from the receiver position. And, it's probably unreasonable to expect Ricky Pearsall alone or Jauan Jennings alone to replicate the impact of 2023 Brandon Aiyuk. But if you can get both of those guys pulling the type of weight that they did on Sunday, I thought they were both fantastic and they both picked their spots. And I think if you could get that moving forward, then this offense can reasonably stay at this elite level heading into January. So let's look at the numbers for Jauan Jennings after these 3 weeks, because I think something really started clicking for the 49ers yesterday. He obviously is now healed. He was playing with 5 broken ribs for much of this season. But when we look at those numbers by the end of the season, maybe they will surpass last year's, and maybe he will be able to earn a couple million more than he otherwise would have.
Yeah, we were giving out a couple of game balls earlier on the show, David, and I was choosing between Jauan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall as my second one. First one went to Brock Purdy, and ultimately went with Jauan Jennings because of the red zone production and that being an area where the 49ers struggled so badly in 2024. My last one for you, I know we're going to hear from Kyle Shanahan a little bit later on his teleconference, but from what you know right now, do you have a sense of how close Yetur Gross-Matos and Tatum Bethune might be to a return a week from today? And then also whether Jordan Elliott in that late scratch is something that might be a multi-week concern.
I think that Yetur will be back this next week. They're slow playing him because he aggravated the hamstring when they fired up his practice window last time. He wasn't on IR at the time, but he returned to practice and hurt his hamstring again. So that was before the New York Giants game. So now they're being really delicate with that. Opened up the window this past week. You know, they had already been managing things with him because he was dealing with a knee that stretches back to last year. So he only practices on Thursdays. So they opened it on Thursday and he practiced, and they never planned to throw him into the game against the Titans. But now, you know, there's going to be an extra day as well because it's a Monday night game. That, by the way, is a potentially huge return for the 49ers. I mean, they have not had much of an interior pass rush at all this year. Whatever juice they have had along the inside has come from defensive ends who have slid inside the way that Chris Kacerek likes to set things up. I know Yetur is technically one of those guys, but they're playing him a lot on the inside when he's available, and he was delivering a plus pass rush for the 49ers. I mean, it's really sad to think about what was, right? What was back when the 49ers had Bosa, had Michael Williams, had Yetur Gross-Matos, had Bryce Huff, all those guys healthy. I mean, they closed out 2 games. You know, they're Mariano Rivera 2 games, as Robert Saleh likes to say, to open the season. That's not easy to do in the league, but they got Seattle with Bosa, and they got New Orleans with Huff, and Yetur Gross-Matos was a big part of those pass rushes. So I know you're not going to get Bosa back. I know you're not going to get Michael back. But I think that Yetur would be a nice boost for pass rush that needs a little bit more juice.
Without a doubt. You put Gross-Matos inside with Keon White and Cleve Ferrell on one side and Bryce Huff on the other side. That'd be your turbo package for sure. What are your thoughts on the run defense? I mean, last year the run defense just got completely trampled. And overall, it's better in some games. They went into yesterday as far as the run defense, 12th in the NFL at about 104 yards per game. But they've had some games. The first half in Cleveland against Junkins, the entire game, really, yesterday against Pollard and Spears, they allowed them to turn the corner too much on the outside run game and get down that sideline, and they wound up giving up 136 yards rushing and 6.8 yards a pop. And you're going to see one of the best running backs in football when you go to Indy a week from tonight. It is way better than it was last year, David. But is the rush defense consistently good enough?
Well, that's the big question moving forward. And you know, it's last year they ranked number 29 in advanced efficiency against the run. This year they're up to the top 10, which shows you that a lot of the league struggles to defend the run, which is why I think that offenses are starting to skew more toward that direction, to take advantage of these downsizing defenses that struggle to tackle and set edges. But they are way better than last year. They've given themselves at least a puncher's chance to control game flow this year, because if you can't stop the run, you're not going to have any fun. That's what Arden Key used to always say, and Chris Kacerek says it all the time now. I mean, if you can't stop the run, you're going to get run out of the building. You're never going to be able to pass rush. You won't even build yourself a platform to try to get some takeaways, right? That was the problem last year, is that you just run all day on them, and it didn't matter if the pass defense or the pass rush was okay, because they never got a chance to showcase it, because it was always 3rd and 2, you know? So it's one of those things where it's improved enough to get the 49ers in the conversation of having a competent defense, but the defense obviously still has a lot of flaws. I think there's a recognition inside the building that the offense has got to be the locomotive that pulls the train. They have to shield the defense. That's just the reality. You know, a lot of people were alarmed with the performance yesterday. I think that's just the reality. Like, they're not going to be able to smother teams on a week-in, week-out basis. Not without Nick Bosa, not without Fred Warner, not without Michael Williams. This is a defense that occasionally will be able to deliver a game that's greater than the sum of its collective parts, and that's a huge credit to Robert Saleh and his staff for making more out of very little. But there will also often be very, very tough games that will necessitate the 49ers to win in an offensive shootout style. And, getting somebody like Yetur Gross-Matos back might be what nudges that defense forward just a little bit to give the offense a little bit more breathing room. And, another big thing is I got to answer all these questions in terms of complementary football, because the defense obviously has a ceiling this year. Like, the defense is not going to be great this year, but that's where the special teams comes in, right? They were last season. They were terrible last season. They're the best unit in football this year. That margin that the 49ers have earned through the third phase of the game, that's something that's helping them pick up some of this slack on defense.
David, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming by. Have a great swim and enjoy this up and down schedule where we're like holidays, the latest bye ever, Monday Night Football, short week, long week. I can't keep up, but you're doing a great job, and we'll keep reading you in the SF Standard.
All right, guys. Injuries from the game. Spencer Burford with his knee and ankle checked out pretty good. Expected to practice this week. Ricky Purcell just aggravated his PCL again and his ankle sprained. We'll see how this week goes with him. Not sure if he'll be ready to practice. We'll have to see how he is when we come back here in a couple of days. Jordan Elliott with his knee irritation is expected to be good to practice this week. Nick Martin still remains in the concussion protocol. And Bethune, Samo, and Eric Kendricks, I'm expected to get those guys back for practice this week. And we'll continue with E-Tour practicing also. Go ahead, guys.
Kyle, when you looked at the defense, another inconsistency, some missed tackles. What did you see there?
A little bit of what you just said. I mean, that we had some missed tackles, too many of them. Less than we did versus Cleveland. Got a little better in that way, but not to be confused with good enough. I thought in the second half, I got away from us a little bit those last two drives. We were more expecting more 2-minute offense. We're in some more 2-minute calls, and they stuck with some RPO runs, which got a few explosives on us, which tallied up about 50 to 60 yards pretty fast. And then I think the interception opportunities that we had, I think if we come down with those, that got a chance to make that game look a little bit different.
There were times where there were like 9 hats in the screen for, to go after the ball, but then sometimes less than that. Is there anything that you need to discuss with consistency with them, or is that just it?
Discuss with consistency is about coaching what happens on a play and mistakes and stuff. But when you talk about getting hats in the screen and things like that, that's effort, running to the ball. I haven't had an issue with that at all.
Kyle, what's the plan if Eric Kendricks comes back to practice as far as just seeing would you expect him, if he's healthy, to have a chance to be elevated and get out and contribute on Monday?
Yeah, if he was totally healthy, but that's with all of them. Same with Tatum, coming back from his high ankle. We're not sure how they're going to look. So we'll get him in there, see how it goes. We should get 2 full speed practices in, which should give us a good idea. But we've been short these last couple of weeks, especially losing these guys. With Nick Martin, that's why we had to take guys off other teams to get them up last week. So they got to get back into practice first, show us where they're at and stuff and how it's going, and that'll give us a chance to make some decisions come Friday or this week come Saturday.
How did you view Brock's game? Was he, as far as decision making and where the ball went, was it how would you rate that performance compared to the rest of the games this season?
I thought Brock had a really good game. Made a number of plays. By no means was perfect. There's a couple that he missed out there. There's also a couple plays that he made when it didn't seem like anything was there. So I thought Brock had a real good game.
I know a concern of yours before the game was Russell Simmons and how he can be so aggressive to the center of the defensive line. How do you feel your offensive line performed?
I thought our O-line played well. Simmons was still a problem. He's a hell of a player. We knew that going in, and feel just the same, if not stronger, going out. It was tough when we didn't have two guys on him, like you always see, like you see on tape. He's very good at beating his one-on-ones. I felt like when we got two guys on him, we handled him pretty good. But he kept competing through the game, so I had a lot of respect for him in that way. And I loved how our guys competed against him because he's a very big talent, and he plays with the right demeanor and how physical and violent he plays. And I loved how our guys were up for the challenge.
Kyle, you a couple times now have activated Sebastian Valdez, or elevated him, I should say, and then made him inactive. What's kind of the reasoning behind that?
Just mainly when we don't have those guys up and we have an extra spot. Sometimes we like showing guys just appreciation for what they've been doing in practice and everything. Gives them a bit of a bonus and things like that. Makes them allowed to earn a little bit more money for the week, and he's earned it. He's been awesome here for us, and so we felt he deserved that.
Kyle, I have a bit of a two-parter for you. The first one is, are you going to open up Jacob Cowing's window this week? And what do you need to see from Jordan Watkins for him to get on the field, especially if Ricky isn't able to go?
Jordan needs to show out on the practice field that he's better than the guys in front of him. And it's really tough with these guys when they've missed so much time. But he's been out here for a little bit, getting back in shape and doing a good job in practice. But we're going to play the top guys, and he's still working to show that he's one of those. And what was the other question? The one before that?
Is the window going to be opened on Jacob Cowing?
No, they didn't tell me this week. So I think our goal is next week for Chicago.
Kyle, do you admire what Phillip Rivers is doing at his age, and have you had a chance to watch his performance against Seattle?
I haven't had a chance to watch it, but I actually got to talk to him a little bit last week, and I admire the hell out of it. It's I think he's capable of it. What he did last night, he gave that team a chance to win. So we all know everyone's seen that he's capable of it. But the way he plays and the style he plays with, I respect him as much as any quarterback I've ever studied. Just growing up in this over the last 20 years or whatever. And to me, what I admire the most is someone at that age to be able to come in there and want to play the right way, which is hanging in that pocket and taking some of those hits. That's something that gets very old fast to a lot of people. And for him to still have that toughness and that competitiveness, and he's not going to get into anything unless he's all about it and 100% in. And that's why he made the decision. And that's why I think he's giving them a good chance to win and help their team.
Why did you talk to him last week? How did that come about?
Just because he was talking with Gus, because he's got a good relationship with Gus Bradley, being together there with the Chargers, and then Gus just came down to my room and got to talk to him for a little bit. I was telling him how cool it would be, and then about 10 seconds into it, I realized that we were playing against him in 10 days, so I tried to kind of sway away from that and tell him how dumb it would be, but it didn't work.
Kyle, what's the level of concern for Pearsall's injury, particularly the PCL, given the first time it took so long to get him back on the field?
There is a concern. I think, just seeing kind of how those have gone this year. I think, the ankle it was a tough ankle injury, but, that it checked out, that it wasn't a high, and he was able to get through the game is somewhat encouraging. That shouldn't rule him out for this week, but that combined with the knee, he aggravated it, which is something, same thing you guys would see with Mac when he was in. Mac aggravated his PCL, and when you land on that, it's real painful for a while. And but it can go away, and that's how you'd see it with Mac throughout the games, and that's kind of how it's been with Ricky. But I think on that last third down, which was one of I thought the biggest plays in the game, that allowed us to get a 3-score lead, not allow them to have the ball down 2 scores there at the end. But he landed on his knee, and that's a painful thing when you have that. So hopefully, it's not at all like it was when he first did it. But it does take time for that pain to go away, and hopefully that'll be sooner than later over these next 8 days.
On that first play of the game, did that look like a hip drop tackle to you?
Oh yeah, no doubt. That one will be an easy one for him to see. That was definition of one.
Anything else, guys?
Yeah, Kyle, what's your level of what have you thought from the rookie class overall as the season's gone along? It seems like a lot of them aren't playing as much as they were earlier, but like you said, basically that you're going to play the best guys. Guys like Colby got in a little bit the other day, but Siegel hasn't played in a while, and they had played a lot earlier in the year. Are they still learning and getting better, although they're not in the field?
Yeah, I haven't thought about, I'm not looking at board with all our draft picks and everything, but just as a whole, like I feel the same way about our rookie class now that I did at the beginning. I've been very encouraged with them. I think we got the right type of guys. I think the guys on defense have contributed and played a bunch. I hear you with Siegel, but that's not much against Siegel. That had to do with Mustafa coming back and Tig being a lot more experienced and playing at a pretty good level. And, we're not just going to play young guys just to play them. I have no problem playing young guys, but they got to be further along than the veteran in front of them. And, you look at some positions and those guys have come back. And so it's given us more depth. They've gotten to play at times, which will help them going into next year. But I also know at a number of those positions, if a guy gets hurt, I like the next guy to step up with a bunch of these rookies. And the D linemen have been doing throughout the year. Jauan Jennings, I think, has been great in practice. He just hasn't gotten his opportunity with our back staying healthy. And but I'm excited about a rookie class.
Yeah, didn't do much of the stat sheet yesterday, but Kittle has gone out of his way at least 2 or 3 times to talk about how impressive Collins is on film. What's your level of how much do you like what he's done this year?
I really like what Alfred's done this year. I still want him to keep getting better, and he definitely hasn't arrived yet, but he's shown us that he is what we hoped he'd be in terms of his talent level. And then getting to know the guy, I think he's been even better than anticipated as a dude. Just a guy who really likes football, a guy who's worked every day. I like where he is, but I also am more excited about what I think he can be. And it's going to be a lot of work finishing the season out that hopefully he can continue to get better and even come back next year stronger.
It seemed like Trent Williams knocked a lot of guys over yesterday, a lot of pancakes. Do you take note of that, or does Chris Furster take note of that the way the wide receiver room takes note of big blocks by their members?
No, they don't. Not that I know of. I haven't heard of it yet. I know Hank had that hard hat award for knockdowns and stuff, but I haven't heard anything like that in the O-line. It's, we expect it. Also, sometimes you don't want guys going for the knockout every play. You just want them to block them as well as they can. So you go for the knockout on O-line, you whiff a lot. So there's a fine line between both of those. But I didn't know that about Trent as far as that, but I did know he had a hell of a game. He played really well in the run and the pass game, and been very excited with how Trent's been this year.
Kyle, one on Brent Jones, winning to the Hall of Fame yesterday. What are your memories of him and how he played the game?
I loved Brent Jones. He was in his prime when I was here as a ball boy, 6th grade to 9th grade. So that's who I remember being the Niners tight end, and he was as good as it gets. Always statistically, just airing it out. One of the best pass tight ends in the league, from what I remember when I was in middle school, and even in high school, and just how cool of a dude he was. I remember a lot of guys from those years, but he was one of the guys who was, different than others. There's a group of them, but he was right up there as one of the cooler guys on the team. And I got to see him yesterday right before the national anthem, and it was cool to see him, congratulate him, and that was it was only a matter of time. He's one of the Niner best, and it was really cool to see him getting in our Hall of Fame.